The Prelude to War, Acadia. Welcome, grade 7s, to lesson 5.3. Why did the English expel the Acadians from their land in Nova Scotia? So, let's find out and stick around and let's learn something. Like the intro said, it's lesson 5.3. Why did the English expel the Acadians from their land in Nova Scotia, also known as Acadia? This is the prelude to war. This is all about Acadia and the Acadians and the people living there. Quick review. The Acadians, if you forgot or if you weren't paying attention or if you were just joining us for the very first time, the Acadians were the French descendants living in what is now Nova Scotia. And the power for Nova Scotia, the power of Acadia transferred hands many times during the 1600s. And by 1710, it was under British control. They had a stronghold over Acadia. But in this entire time period of the 1600s, the early 1700s, and even beyond that, the Acadians developed their own unique culture, which was not American, which was not French, which was not English. It was their own thing. Britain then, by 1710, had changed the name Acadia to that of Nova Scotia, which is still in existence today. But they allowed the Acadians to live in peace, and that's a big thing. This is a big thing, because when you are in a peaceful time, you can focus your energy on other things, like having your culture thrive, right? And that's going to be a very important thing because it's the way of life of the Acadians. It's so important to them. By the year 1750, now in 1750, 10,000 is quite a bit. By today's standards, maybe not so much, but in 1750, 10,000 Acadians living in Nova Scotia, that is quite a lot. And you can see here on the map, this map is taken from your textbook, the Acadian settlements that are there. So we've got 10,000 people that are living there. Many of the Acadians of the time married the Mi'kmaq, and they were almost all French-speaking Catholics. So we have a common culture, we have a common language, and now we have a common religion between the Acadians that are there. And over time, like I mentioned earlier, they developed their very own unique way of life. And even their economy was unique. It was based on fishing and it was based on farming, which you don't often see. Unfortunately, though, this chapter is all about war and peace. And we see that the Acadians are caught in the middle. Britain wanted more English-speaking people in Nova Scotia. You can't blame the British. It's a British colony now. They've got control. They want more English-speaking people living there. So the governor, the English governor, Charles Lawrence, at the time, he started to question the Acadian and Mi'kmaq allegiance, right? So what was often happening is the Mi'kmaq would often capture British ships on their way to the English colonies. So this made the governor think, like, well, maybe these groups shouldn't be trusted. The Acadians and the Mi'kmaq, they shouldn't be trusted. Where does their allegiance actually stand? They're under British control. We're letting them kind of live here, but they're causing us a little bit of a headache. The Acadians, although they were living there, they were happy living under British control, but they did not swear loyalty. They did not swear allegiance to Britain. And this made Britain a little leery and weary about what was the future going to hold for the Acadians in Nova Scotia. So in 1755, Governor Charles Lawrence gives an ultimatum to the Acadians. And he says to them, you either swear loyalty to the British Crown, or that's it, you're losing all of your land. In the meantime, the Acadians, they're thinking, well, no, wait a second, like, I don't want to be a part of this war. We know the war is going to happen, so it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When is the war going to happen? And the Acadians, really, they wanted to remain neutral. Okay, that was their stance right from the beginning of the early rumblings of this war. The Acadians promised not to fight them. We won't fight you. We're not going to fight you. We're not going to get pulled into this war and fight for the French. But at the same time, they refused to take a British oath, which would show loyalty to the English. And this sets the stage for the great upheaval, where the British round up all the Acadians and expel them from Nova Scotia. And that's known as the expulsion of the Acadians, the great upheaval. So now in Canada, we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This was signed into law in 1982, but that didn't exist in 1755 when this expulsion of the Acadians started happening. Governor Lawrence, he thought that the English were not safe while these 10,000 Acadians were living in Nova Scotia. And it wasn't just some sort of like crazy idea that he had. He found some proof of this when the Acadians were approaching when the British were approaching a fort, and they found 300 armed Acadians inside that fort. Well, if you're wanting to stay neutral and if you don't want to get involved in this war, Governor Lawrence is like, well, then why are you taking up arms inside this fort, right? I thought you wanted to remain neutral. So this made him pretty upset, and he gave the order that the French inhabitants of the province shall be removed out of the country as soon as possible. So the governor, he's in charge, he gives this order. So the British troops, they come in, the soldiers come in, and they begin rounding up the Acadians. And it's really sad what the British do to the Acadians. They separate the families of many Acadians. They force them onto ships, and they ship them off to far-off lands. Now, most of the Acadians, you need to know, were born in Nova Scotia, were born in Acadia. So to be shipped off to some far-off land, they didn't know where they were going. The soldiers went even further. Not only did they separate the families and ship them off to who knows where, they burned down the homes and the churches of the Acadians. And then they went even further, and they destroyed the farms, and they let the animals loose, which was really, really sad. So any kind of hope of keeping the Acadian culture alive was dwindling here. It wasn't looking very good for the Acadians. Most of the Acadians, they were shipped to the New England colonies. Some went to England, France, the Caribbean, if you will, however you want to say it. But others also escaped this great upheaval, and they went south to Louisiana, to New Orleans, which is part of New France. And they formed what is today the Cajun community, which is still very strong down in New Orleans and down in the southern part of Louisiana, all because of this great upheaval that the British did for or against the Acadians. And you can see here on the map some of the places that they went to: France, England, Caribbean, and to the New England colonies as well. To continue on with the sadness, many of the Acadians, they did not survive this deportation that took place. There was disease. So here we're hearing about the 3 Ds: death, disease, and destruction. So many of them died because of disease. The life on these ships wasn't good. If you ran away trying to make your way to New Orleans, you're in the wilderness. It's ripe for disease. Many of them drowned, and unfortunately, a lot of them just starved to death. In total, 10,000 Acadians were driven away from Nova Scotia. And the Mi'kmaq, who were allies to the French and to the Acadians, they saw what was happening, and they made a decision not to push back against the British. Instead, they listened to the British, and they decided, okay, if we need to swear an oath, we will swear an oath. And then when the 7 Years' War came to an end in 1763, many Acadians made their way back to Nova Scotia, but by this time they didn't feel very welcome, so they went to New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island instead. And fast forward to today, and those 10,000 Acadians that were driven away now make up approximately 300,000 Acadians now living in Atlantic Canada today. So the Acadian expulsion that was taking place in 1755, they did come back. It wasn't totally wiped out. And like I said, we've got approximately 300,000 Acadians living here in Atlantic Canada today. So that's pretty impressive. What I'd like you to do right now is head over to your notebook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.